This is a new format. Every day I have a lot of questions. So I decided to answer 5 questions every week in that format. Here are the first 5 for this week. So Steven, the best surface to start playing tennis when you're very young is clay. I explain why. Clay is more demanding. It's very difficult to hit a winner. You need to learn to build a point. On other surfaces that are way faster, it's easier to, go for shots and hit winners, and you don't learn to rally, you don't learn to prepare the point and then to be able to finish it. You don't learn to build. That's such a key. Other thing is, physically it's more difficult because the rallies are longer. Mentally it's more difficult because you don't have easy shots, you need to work for everything. So also in terms of values that are going to be useful for this sport and for life, I guess, I think clay is the best surface. And of course you'll find clay courts in most of the Mouratoglou academies and tennis centers everywhere in the world. Sorry to say that, but I don't like these questions because it's never one thing or the other. It's everything. The physical development is important, of course. It's a very physical sport, like every sport. But if I have to say what is the most important when you're 12 years old, I would say, number one, have the cleanest technique you can. Simply because when you'll get to 14 years old and after, of course, it's going to be extremely difficult to make major changes. If you don't need major changes and your technique is clean, perfect. But if it's not, this is the main focus before 14, from 12 to 14, extremely important moment for that. Number two, compete. This is where you make your experience. This is where you learn how to win. This is where you understand the game better. If you don't compete, this is going to hurt you. It's important to compete as much as possible between 12 and 14. And third, fitness, but I would say prevention more than anything. Prepare your body for the future. Don't do musculation, it's not the right period for that. You'll do it when you'll have your final height, or mostly. Do the prevention is extremely important, and you have to get your body ready for high level. And if you want to know more about prevention that is important for that age, we have several videos about that on the Instagram account of the Academy. Bhavesh, so I heard you never played tennis, you're going to the university, you realize there are tennis courts and you want to start tennis. Great, welcome. I'm going to tell you what you should focus on firstly, as you asked. First of all, we are in today's world, a lot of new sports offer instant satisfaction because they're easy to play, they're not very technical. Tennis is very difficult, very technical. So I would say number one goal is not to learn the technique because it's boring, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of energy, and I don't want you to stop tennis. When you start, I want you to be 80 years old and still play. So the goal is to learn to like it. How you like it? By playing, by hitting rallies. So the first thing you have to do is to be able to play rallies, not do techniques. You'll do that after. So how do you play rallies? First of all, you focus only in the service boxes. Don't try to play from the baseline at first, it's too difficult. Stay in the boxes, take balls for kids, the ones that are softer, because they're easier to control, they don't bounce as high, they're not as fast, and find someone that is able to rally with you and rally as much as possible. Hit 100 balls without missing in the service box before moving back. And then you don't move back to the baseline, you move back a little bit. When you're able to do 40, 50, 100 from that position, then you can move to the baseline. When you can rally from the baseline, when I say rally, I mean just hit the ball on the other side of the net without missing, several times with consistency, then you can start to learn the technique more and start to do new things. So first of all, learn to enjoy rallying. And never forget that tennis is a social sport. It's a great way to make new friends and find new friends. So find guys who want to start like you and you'll make friends and you'll create your own little community in your university. Kamika, great question. I have a full masterclass on this channel about that. When I read your question, first of all, you make the link between the fact that you don't believe you can win and the fact that you are a slow starter in matches and that you need a few games to really start playing. Probably you start playing looking at your opponent to try to understand if you can win or not. That's basically what you're doing, most probably, and that's why you always lose the first 3 games or more before starting to play. The first thing that you can do to avoid it is not to focus on am I going to win or am I not going to win, because this is not the topic, but focus on, I enter the match, I have one goal, probably 2 or 3 goals actually. What are my goals? And I focus only on my goals. You have to take away this idea of I can or I can't win. Don't treat the result of the match at the start of the match. Nobody knows if you can win or not. Actually, you always can. But don't think about this now. This is not the moment to think about this. So take that out and be focused on your goals. 1, 2, 3 main goals for your match. And your mission is to give 100 mental intensity on those goals. Do this and tell me how it works. An example of a goal is turn around my backhand to dictate with my forehand as often as I can, but do my maximum to move around my backhand every time I can. But once again, watch the masterclass because I go much deeper into all those things. So Arnav, how long does it take to get used to a new grip? Difficult to answer a question because it depends how big is the difference between your former grip and your new grip. So if you have a very extreme grip and you're hitting the ball with the back of your hand, and then you want to change to a grip with which you're going to hit the ball with the inside of your hand, this takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time for one reason is because all your feeling and your sensations, you have them with the back, with the wrist turned, and you have to learn to have the same sensations with the hand open, so with this part of the hand. This takes a lot of time. How much? Some people never get used to it. That's a very, very, very difficult one. When you're very young, it's easier. When you've been playing for 10 years or 15 years like this, it's very, very difficult. I would say it takes around 6 months. Now, if you change your grip from this to this, it takes a few weeks, not so long. Depends how extreme is the change. The later you do the technical change, the less chances you have to make it successful and the more difficult it is to do it. So again, I always say it, before 14 years old is the best period to make any technical change. Don't wait. If you see a technical problem, change it. Before you decide to make a technical change, make sure that what you're gonna win with it is gonna be much bigger than what you're gonna lose. So think about it twice. I've seen a lot of players make a huge grip change, for example, from here to there. They never came back. They never got such a good forehand as it was before. So sometimes players have technical weirdnesses. Look at the efficiency of the shot. The shot is not supposed to look good. It's supposed to be efficient. And think about also potentially what you have to lose. Because in every situation, and this is extremely true for a technical change, there's a lot to gain, but there is also a lot to lose. So make sure that what you're going to lose is not bigger than what you're going to win. When you ask me the question, I have something that pops up to my mind straight away. And I always say that my biggest asset when I started to coach was that I knew nothing. And I think it's quite illogical or counterintuitive at least, because people think, okay, to do a job, you need to learn the job, you need to know the job, you need to know the technique of the job. And to be a tennis coach, you need to be great at technique, great at tactics, probably great at mental. So you need tools, and all the coaches, or 99% of the coaches, have studied for many years, or at least a few years, before becoming a coach. I did not. I did not study anything. I studied tennis because I was watching tennis, of course. I was playing tennis. But I never studied the tools to coach people. And that became my biggest asset. As I had no tools, I had to use my common sense, my logic. I had to think a lot. I had to think twice or 3 times or 10 times more than other people who had the tools. How am I going to solve this problem? And as it was a passion for me, and it was, for me, non-negotiable that when I take a player, he or she has to progress hugely and win much more than before, I was always looking for the solutions without the tools. So it developed a lot my common sense and my creativity. So I think that's great. If I had had the tools, I think I would have been much less creative, much less solution oriented, because you think you have the solutions already. Oh, the forehand is not good. Okay, we're going to change the technique. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. I more focused on efficiency. How does he win? How does she win? How does she lose? I was elaborating solutions only based on my common sense. Then after later I learned the tools, but I kept the same mindset. And I think this mindset is a key. Thank you. Don't hesitate to feed me with questions by DM on my Instagram, and I'll answer the next 5 within a week.